So yeah, thank you all for joining today's webinar. So this month is the last webinar that we're holding for the year, as it's heading towards Christmas time. But we thought with the recent release of a lot of the New South Wales and Western Australia charging grants that we would host a webinar basically running through what those grants involve, the funding that you'll see, who's eligible, and then some issues that we find and how we can help, as well as some of the hardware and software that we would look at recommending. So today, my name's Austin. I'm the National Sales Manager for EVSE Australia. I've been with the company for 2.5 years. I have a background in mechanical engineering and love everything EV and EV charging related. And I've got my colleague Thomas here.
Yeah, I'm Thomas. So I've recently just joined the EVSE team earlier this year. My background's actually in science, so I really get behind that technological and the more nitty-gritty of this sort of projects and EV charging. So it's really exciting to be here.
Perfect. So look, guys, this webinar is being recorded just like normal. So we will send you through a recording in about a day or two after this has been completed. If you have any questions, please just put them in the chat box and we can look at attending to those at the end of the presentation. Otherwise, we'll look at beginning now. Perfect. So the agenda today is essentially we're going to run through the grants overview and then issues we can help solve. So some of what we've experienced in the first rounds of the destination charging grants, as well as the Charge Up WA grants. So today we're just running through all that public destination charging. And then we're going to cover across the approved hardware and software and what we've found to be very reliable. And then a couple case studies we'll finish with from each of those two grants.
Definitely. I think this presentation today is all about being very real world. So certainly if you have any questions at all, as Austin mentioned earlier, do put them in the chat box because we would like to address them all. And I'm sure other people have the same questions as you do.
Perfect. So just quickly, a bit about us is, so EVSE has been around since 2015. We're one of the longest serving and largest turnkey EV charging companies in Australia. Our mission is really to help accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in Australia and to decarbonise the way we move. So we really care about a more sustainable future. And from that, we've been able to install, supply and continue to support around 5,000 EV charging stations across both Australia and New Zealand with our team that's now based in New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria and Western Australia. So we have local support and we have local EVSE members on the ground to help you.
So with EVSE, we've actually worked with a large number of partners, both in the government space and also in private industry. So for example, in New South Wales government, one of the ones that's really driving this New South Wales government grant. So we've worked with them quite closely. Also, from the Western Australia point of view, we have worked with industry, mines and regulations. So we have worked with both governments that are running this grant. But we've actually worked with a large number of commercial partners that are spread around Australia. So while we are doing this in New South Wales and Western Australia, primarily for this presentation, we can provide rollouts Australia-wide, realistically, if we need to. But definitely, we have that experience behind us.
Exactly. And part of that work that we've done with these organisations and governments is that we do everything from an initial site assessment and consultation with you. We understand, what you want, and then we're able to provide our recommendations over, what type of charging infrastructure you need, what your power availability is of your sites. And then we can perform the supply and install of the hardware and software, the installation piece. And then probably one of the most important aspects is the ongoing support. And I do know for this grant that they do care about getting a lot of that data for the WA charge up, especially to be able to see, how it's been going for the last several months. So we can help support in that aspect as well.
Definitely. And something to highlight with this slide as well is the partners we have, they're extremely broad between developers, fleet owners. They all have different requirements and we always work to meet those requirements.
Fantastic. Okay. So in terms of the grant, basically the New South Wales Destination Charging Grant and the WA Charge Up grants The main reason that these are being deployed is to incentivize the uptake of electric vehicles in Australia. And it's a great way for local businesses to attract unique and loyal customers. So the idea of installing a charging station out the front of your business will, one, attract people to your business compared to somewhere else that doesn't have a charger, but also it builds your brand image and brand loyalty. It shows that you're a sustainable company and a sustainable business. And then it also helps incentivize the reduction of carbon emissions in the air, which is always a bonus.
I think another big point as well as really increasing customer loyalty, it also helps your employees. People want to work at a company that's green, and then you also provide a service, which is EV car charging. Petrol's expensive. People want a cheap alternative, and reducing the cost of transport is a huge, huge deal.
Absolutely. And you'll see later in this presentation that you can actually earn a return on investment from the charging infrastructure, and it can be quite beneficial. So we've got a bit of data on that for public charging stations that you're looking to get visitors in and earning a bit of revenue from that charging session. Okay, so the grants overview. What have we got, Thomas?
Yeah, so in terms of the grants, both of them follow a relatively similar process. First, you look at the eligibility. So the best way to do that is both respective grants have their own websites where they have FAQs and also guidelines. So I'd recommend that you look at those. Primarily, WA grant, it's open for small to medium enterprise and local council, but we'll go into that a bit more detail later. Similarly, New South Wales Destination, primarily rural tourism destinations, but once again, we can touch on that in more detail later. Once you've actually determined that you're eligible, which you can do, you can work with us as well. We're quite happy to recommend. And there also is some flexibility as well, which we can talk about later as well when we talk about that eligibility, but certainly there is a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, and then in terms of obtaining quotes for each site, that's where you can have us assist. Or another energy provider or EV charging provider, where we would send an electrician out to your site. They would understand and have a look at the power in your switchboard. Then they would understand where you would want the charger to be installed. This section of obtaining the quotes is very important because a lot of the time you want to make sure that the quote that you're creating is cost effective. And the way to do that is to make sure that the location of where you're putting the charger is close to the switchboard. Obviously, if you have a charger that's 100 meters away from where the switchboard is, that's going to be a higher installation cost because it's more cabling and more work for the electrician. So keeping that in mind, as well as choosing sites that have adequate power availability, is extremely important in terms of implementing infrastructure now, but also adding more chargers in the future.
Absolutely. And at EVSE, we are happy to help with that. We have a team of engineers that can look at site drawings and give you recommendations as to where we think on that site would be best for chargers.
Absolutely. So once you've created that, once you've received the quotations from your provider, what you'll then need to do is submit an application. What we're finding is from both of the grants, or slightly different from the previous versions, is that they want you to submit one site per application. The reason behind this is if you have an AC charger application and a DC charger application, that DC charging station, that might require power upgrades. So that might take a much longer time to install. So this way you can have that AC charging station installed very quickly at one of your sites, whilst the DC takes time. And so that is a slight variation from the original rounds of Destination and Charge Up.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important as well that you get those submissions for application in as soon as possible, particularly with the Charge Up grant, where the government's kind of retained a bit of choice around what they approve and what they don't based on who's rural, who's metropolitan. They have a little bit of an idea of how many they're going to assign to each area. So you want to make sure you get in early and obtain the funding that they want specifically for your situation.
Exactly, because it will run out. And especially now that it's not really in its infancy anymore, the governments have understood where they lacked in the previous rounds. And you'll see in terms of the funding, they've been a bit more generous this time in terms of installation. But it is a great way to incentivize other states to kind of have that uptake of grants and be able to visualize and understand what a successful grant process looks like. After you're submitting the application, which we can help with, because I believe they are pretty stringent on what type of quotation and line items they need in each quote, you'll be notified of an assessment. This can take roughly 8 weeks for you to receive a response. And then after that, you need to provide the installation where we can assist in performing that for you, and then submission of evidence. So, you take a photo of the charge, you prove that you've paid the invoice, and then the New South Wales government will review that evidence and then provide payment to you. All right, so this is the funding overview for the New South Wales Destination Charging Grants and the WA Charge Up. I'll run through the destination charging grants. So what you'll see is it's 75% of funding towards the cost of an eligible 7 kilowatt or 22 kilowatt electric vehicle charger. So this is for wall box chargers that have 1 port or dual port towers that have 2 ports. We also get funding off the installation cost up to 75%, which is now capped at $3,000 per charging port. This is amazing. The previous grant funding was $1,000 where it capped for install per charging station. So this means now that with a dual port charger, you can get up to $6,000 of funding covered for the installation of that charging station, which from our experience from round 1 was a significant issue for a lot of customers because the hardware funding was great, but really the large costs associated with this project came from the installation itself. And then lastly, it's 75% towards the first year of an eligible annual EV charging software subscription. So it's per charge port. It's not mandatory this time. And you only need it to be for 1 year. You don't need it to be for 2 years like the first round.
Absolutely. And in terms of the charge up grant in WA, similar to the first round, what they're offering is 50% of the purchase cost of up to 4 EV chargers. These can be done across 5 sites, but as we mentioned before, you're looking at 1 site per application. What they have changed since the first round is they actually opened this up to DC chargers. So it presents a lot more opportunities for you to take advantage of that grant and really get a good financial investment for the future as well. Mm-hmm. Similar to the New South Wales Destination Grant, there is also a subsidy in terms of the installation cost, which is limited to 50% of the installation, and is limited at $5,000 per site as opposed to per charger for Greater Perth, and $10,000 per regional areas. This is, however, increased, but basically doubled if the charger is greater than 150 kilowatts. So it provides a little more buffer when you are looking at those expensive chargers, which have a higher requirement for installation. One of the differences between the New South Wales Destination Grant, however, is in the Destination Grant with the installation funding, you can use it for a little more things. So you can provide, for example, spare cables and signage. But then again, on the Charge Up WA grant, you can also include maintenance within the installation cost. And maintenance is a requirement under the grant, particularly for public chargers. They will look at that and consider it. So it's good that they are covering that to a degree.
Yeah, and one thing to mention is that for the New South Wales grant, it's only for AC charging, whereas for the Charge Up WA grant, it's for AC and DC. So they've been very generous. You can get 50% of funding up to even a 350 kilowatt DC charger, so one of the ultra fast charging stations, which is seriously crazy. But in terms of funding around the installation, it's only for New South Wales that you can really cover, bay painting and spare charging cables, pedestals, bollards, wheel stops, and signage. So have a look at the actual forms or contact us because we've gone through it pretty closely, and there's all the fine details in understanding what's covered under what funding section.
Definitely. And another area that the Charge Up grant in particular has expanded since the first round is they will actually cover network upgrade costs up to $100,000 for Western Power and up to $225,000 for Horizon Power. So particularly in WA, where there is those little bit more rural areas, they will cover a large percentage of that cost. And also they do cover software as well. So software is actually required under the Charge Up grant because you're encouraged to charge outside of peak times. So they want evidence that that's occurred. And they do cover 50% of that software cost. They do chip in to help with that.
Fantastic. Hopefully that's clear for you all. If not, send a bit of a message through the chat. But yeah, again, this is recorded, so you'll be able to get a lot of this information in a couple of days as well. Okay, so are you eligible? The next question, so the funding. Now, are you eligible to get that funding? So for New South Wales, To be eligible, you need to be located in one of the eligible LGAs, so the local government areas. Predominantly, that's everywhere outside of Greater Sydney. And they've now included both Wollongong and Newcastle, which were not originally included in the grant in round one. So good on them. And on top of that, it needs to be an approved destination site. So within the grant funding documents, it provides details and pretty specific details around what's an approved destination site. There's a lot of sites in there in a big table, so please have a look at that and determine where you sit. Again, what's new for this grant is now that you have to be listed on the Tourism Data Warehouse. So if you're not listed on that website or on that database, you might have to apply to be listed. But a lot of different organizations like motels, accommodation sites, attraction sites are already on there. So you might already understand that you're on that, and therefore you get the tick for that section. And then lastly, there's no more than 4 existing ports at your site to be eligible. So if you've already, have EV chargers installed from a while ago, and there's more than 4 charging ports, unfortunately, you won't be able to be eligible for that site. If you have multiple sites that don't have that many charging stations, then apply for those.
Absolutely. And the Charge Up grant, compared to New South Wales, is probably a little bit broader in the way they approach things. So any small to medium enterprise can apply for this grant. Gives it a lot of opportunity, absolutely. What was seen a lot in the first round was that a lot of not-for-profit organisations were applying, particularly around the Greater Perth area. And also a lot of local government authorities decided to get on top of this as well. What's included as well is that first point I think you can see on the slide, which is that the charger has to be within WA. And the reason that is noted in there is because franchisees can actually get on board with this as well, as long as the franchisee owner itself, so the small part of that, is actually a small to medium business in size and within WA. What is actually allowed as well is that owners that don't occupy the sites are also allowed to apply for this grant. So they could really use this as a great opportunity to increase the value of their properties as well. And one of the eligibility factors that was kind of touched on earlier, but is kind of a major point, is that this grant is really there to encourage charging outside of the 5 to 9 peak times. So there's certain ways that we can work around that, such as with billing, we can increase costs within that time period or slow down charger speeds. But at EVSE, we've definitely got experience with working around this part of the grant, and it's not too difficult, to be honest. Part of the Charge Up grant as well is that the government's retained quite a bit of right to be a bit more, I guess, let them have a bit more decisional power about who's approved and who's not, which is good in the way that even if you don't meet these criteria, if you believe you still have a case, you can apply to Charge Up and they will give you an idea of what they'll cover. They might cover a percentage of it, less than 50%, but they could still support this. There's also, in terms of the power upgrade costs, which they've added to this grant, if the cost for those upgrades doesn't really align with the size of the charges, they could also look at denying the grant. But the factors that they take into consideration varies a bit depending on the size of the charger. So it's definitely worth reaching out to us and we'll be able to give you some recommendations about how we would expect you to do that application process.
Yeah, perfect. And for the Charge Up WA grant, it's eligible for charging stations to be installed to charge your employees' EVs, also for fleet charging, destination charging, and public charging. So it's quite a broad amount of funding that they're giving to a lot of different organisations. So take it while we have it, and yeah, take advantage of it because it's very, very beneficial to be able to have a charging station at your site to allow your employees to transition to electric a lot easier, to build your brand reputation and loyalty, and as well as to highlight that you have a charger on public charging apps so you can bring more tourism and bring more visitors to your site.
Absolutely. Charger is another source of revenue.
Great. And so with the New South Wales Destination Charging, I think I'll just touch on in terms of eligible payment requirements. So what they'll need is after it's done, you'll need a certificate of compliance from a licensed electrician. And this is very similar to the Charge Up's requirements too. For the charging station, you'll need a sticker on it that's by the New South Wales government, but they will send that to you themselves. Photos of the final installation to prove that it's been completed. And then the EV charging location is published on a public online map. So those maps could be like PlugShare, for example, which is the most common and most well-known public EV charging app, but also for the specific software provider that you've onboarded onto your charging station. And then lastly, just a tax invoice to prove that you've paid for the goods.
Absolutely. And it's very similar for the charger in WA. The only additional requirement is that they require that software so you can provide evidence that you're not charging a huge amount between that 5 to 9 period, which is why they subsidize the cost of the software. But you will need to provide that ongoing for the 2-year period after the chargers have been installed.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's essentially the funding requirements or funding information, as well as the eligibility information. Here is, from our experience, what we've found to be problematic for a lot of customers and how we can help solve that. So the first one is, how do you pick the right site? And this is quite simple to answer. If you have multiple sites, what we can do is send out an electrical team to assess all of these sites, and they can understand the electrical power availability of each of those sites. And then from there, understand the scope of works involved as well. So with your site, you want to make sure that it has enough power to accommodate a charger, if that's AC or if that's even DC. DC charging, like you see in this picture on the right, these take a lot more power than AC chargers. So if you're located next to a major highway, or you're located in an area where people generally stop for 30 minutes or so, you might be looking at having a DC charging station in there to generate a lot of revenue and a lot of turnover with vehicles. And with that, you need to make sure that you have the right power to accommodate that.
Of course, but I think another thing to highlight as well with those DC chargers is the Charge Up grant does support some of that. With that 225 and 150,000 that they're offering for those upgrades, that would cover some of the power availabilities for that site and help support you if you are looking to do those site upgrades.
Yep. The second issue is minimal power availability. So say we've assessed your site and we've deemed it that there's not enough power to put a charger in, or there's not enough power to put multiple chargers in. This is where we can look to implement load management solutions that we'll talk about in a couple slides. But what that means is it prevents you from having to upgrade the power of your site and prevents you from having to wait for a long period of time, because the timelines for power upgrades are quite long. And it gives you the ability to scale charging stations out in your building whilst protecting the building's power. So there's a lot of advantages, and we have the technology to do that.
Absolutely. Technology that we've developed with CSRO, some of the leading parties within Australia. And realistically, a lot of the infrastructure that was put in place wasn't designed with EV charging in mind. But we're very used to dealing with that at EVSE, so we do have that experience to assist you.
Great. Thirdly, the application process, all the information can be a bit confusing, which is why we host these webinars, which is why we have specific brochures that summarize the key information that we can send you as well, and that we can even hold a couple meetings with you and understand, what you're looking for and how we can easily submit for the grant. So we're experienced in this space. We've previously done the first rounds of the charging destination funds, and we'd be happy and well equipped to be able to help you for the next ones.
Absolutely.
And lastly, hardware and software providers, which ones should you pick? It's down to you. We have recommendations based on our experience, but I do know that there's quite a lot of hardware and software providers that the grants are hosting. So do your due diligence, absolutely. Have a look at the different features and functionalities, as well as the support. So make sure that whichever product you choose, it's well supported, because the last thing you want is to have a charger installed, something goes wrong, and then you can't get into contact with the provider, or the provider's service level or service time is very extended.
Absolutely. This is an investment at the end of the day. You want to ensure that that investment is making revenue.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not making any money and it just looks bad on you.
And believe me, if it's public facing, people will let you know that something's wrong with your charger very quickly via PlugShare. So it's also important to keep in mind that it can reflect on your brand and your business. So making sure that you pick a reliable supplier is very important. Okay, so that's a bit about the information around the grant, the funding, the eligibility, and issues that we have experienced from customers in the past. We'll now quickly walk through the approved hardware and software side of things. So some of the hardware that we've found to work well, and some of the hardware that we've implemented in the first rounds of these fundings and have been very well accepted and received. So I'll just walk through them now. Great. So the range that we provide, what you'll find is we do every charging brand, but we have a lot of experience and a lot of positive feedback from one in particular. So with our charging brand, we want to make sure that the chargers we provide you, they provide a great user experience. That's why we recommend chargers with screens that allow you to visualize the feedback of your charging session. You know, when you plug in, you can actually see what's happening on the screen. If it says to change, if it says to take the plug out because something's wrong, you understand that. Or you can plug in, the screen will change and you can start charging and walk away from your vehicle knowing that your vehicle's getting that power.
Absolutely. There's nothing worse than going up to a charger and seeing a flashing red light and not knowing what it means. It's just frustrating and difficult to work with.
No. But in terms of range, so everything from AC to DC charging, we're able to facilitate. But we really care about the reliability and the support side of things. So we want to provide a product. If you'd like to go with us or ask us about some charging brands, we will recommend something that we've found provides a good service level, a good support turnaround time, because of the reasons we said before.
Absolutely. It reflects well on both us and you if those chargers are online.
Perfect. Okay. So we'll just run across the hardware range. So on this screen demonstrates the AC and the DC charging stations that we typically recommend to clients. As you can see, we try to keep a consistent and reliable hardware brand because it allows us to provide consistent and reliable support to you. The AC charging range that we have here, the Ocular IQ dual port tower, that was actually the most sold charger in round one of the New South Wales Destination Charging grants. It was the most sold charger because it's essentially dual port. So it charges two vehicles at once. It's freestanding, so you can install it between two car parks to charge two vehicles. It comes with cable holders. It's small things, but what we've found is you don't want those cables on the floor having a potential tripping hazard. It also keeps them clean, keeps it tidy, and then it has screens, so it lets you know what's going on with your charging session. I think the last thing I'd touch on is it's made from metal. It's fully encased in metal, meaning it's robust for outside. We can implement plastic chargers, but what we've found is plastic chargers in the sun, especially in regional areas, over time looks to fade and discolor. Whereas metal charging stations, it's robust, they're designed and built for outdoors in Australia. And that's one of the main reasons this charger was so popular.
Absolutely. And one of the points I would highlight as well is that it's a fully modular design. So if something does go wrong with that charger, it takes us less than a day to send someone else out. They pull out the broken part and put a new one in. There's no huge cost for you to replacement, and it's done quickly. You don't want to put in a charger at a discount and then have to repair it for 3 times the cost that you put it in for. It makes sense to keep it cheap. And for that, and you're looking at a price of a lifetime. You're not looking at the price up front.
Absolutely. And so as you can see, we do everything from freestanding chargers to wall-mounted chargers. If you're at a site, if you're a site and you can install wall-mounted charging stations, we would recommend it because the wall mounting option provides less of an installation cost for you. Compared to freestanding where you have to cut the ground, cut concrete or potentially trench, it can become quite costly.
Absolutely. And a wall-mounted charger as well fits in very well to an environment. So you don't have to make space for the charger. You don't have to use up a parking spot to put the charger in there. It just fits onto the wall and it means you can fit it in around your existing infrastructure. So for this AC and AC range, it comes in both single phase and 3-phase. So depending on your site, depending on how much power you have, we can work with you if it's for your employees that stay parked at your sites for a long period of time in terms of WA, or if it's for public charging where you kind of want them to stay for a long extended time or overnight for a motel, you can typically choose between that single phase or 3-phase option. And definitely. And this AC range, it's included in both the New South Wales Destination grant and the Charge Up grant as well.
That's right. And now for the DC, which is just included for the WA Charge Up grant. What you'll see is there's 3 products here. The one on the far right is the fastest wall-mounted DC charging station in Australia. It is the 60 kilowatt Ocular Titan. This has been extremely popular because it weighs 100 kilos, but it provides a huge amount of power to vehicles. And the winning thing is that you can mount it on a wall, so it doesn't take up any of that car parking space and doesn't take up much real estate for your site. Whereas, if you're looking at implementing a very large DC charging station, you'd probably look for a site where it's along a major highway or you do have space to install it. But keep in mind, with a lot of this DC charging, you will need the power available. So depending on your site and what charger you choose, it ranges from around 100 amps 3-phase to about 250 amps 3-phase that you need spare on the site.
Absolutely. And these DC chargers as well, particularly that 60, we've installed it already quite a few times within Western Australia, despite not having that subsidy in the price. And it's already been a significant financial asset with them paying it off in under 10 years, but it also significantly increasing foot traffic to the locations where they are installed.
Yeah. So for a 60 kilowatt DC, you typically provide around 60 kilometers of range every 10 minutes. So that's like 360 kilometers an hour. These DCs are super fast. If you have the right site with the right conditions, 100%, I'll be going for that 50% funding for the DC chargers because you'll earn that return on investment back even quicker.
Absolutely. And all these chargers are software agnostic. They can take any software, which is included in both the grants.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've just gone through the hardware range, but we also have a software platform that we recommend as well. So with your software platform, there's a lot to choose from on those sheets. So it's good to understand the charging, what you get and what features you get from that platform. With software, you generally will be provided a lot of information around the charging sessions. So energy in kilowatt hours, how long vehicles typically charge for, and the number of sessions per day, per week, per month, per year. And this can give you a good understanding around the uptake of EVs in your area, especially at your site. And then over time, you can look to really understand from the data, do I need to expand your charging infrastructure to meet more of that demand?
Absolutely. And one of the things I actually really personally love about this platform is they send out a monthly email, which gives you a bit of a breakdown about what your chargers have done, including how many kilos of CO2 you've prevented to going into the atmosphere, which is really good from an ESG reporting standpoint and really makes your business look good when you share that information.
Yep. Yeah. Explorin is the software platform that we recommend. Obviously, we can work with a number of different platforms, and we do. But with Explorin, they're locally supported in Australia. So you get that 7-day remote support throughout the 5 business days as well as on the weekend. And the platform has a 99.9% uptime. So practically, it never goes offline except for scheduled maintenance sessions once a year. So in terms of that support side, as well as where you can go into the back end of the platform and be able to visualize your whole charging information, you can visualize the history of all your data. From each charger, you can see if something faults and the reason behind that, and then both you and Explorin are notified automatically. Like, a lot of functionality comes with this platform.
And definitely in terms of the WA Charge Up grant, with Explorin, we can do a lot of that work in keeping the chargers, discouraging use between that 5 to 9 period that the WA grant demands. So we can set the billing rate a little bit higher during that time or slow down the charging speeds, or we can kind of restrict usage to certain people if it's a workplace.
Yeah, and this Explorin platform works on any OCPP charging station. So any of the major hardware brands that are displayed in these grants, this software platform will work on them.
Excellent. And as Austin, I think, might have mentioned earlier, this is the second largest platform within Australia, so it is very widely used.
Yes, I mean, you say that. So it has over 2,000 charging stations on the platform and counting. So it is the second largest platform in Australia. And that's a mixture of fleet charging, so, workplace or for fleet organizations, as well as public charging. The main advantage to this is the user-friendly platform on the app on your phone, but also from the back end. Very similar to existing apps where you'll go to the charger, you'll scan a QR code on the front of it, and then you'll just have to download the app and start charging. But the benefit with this is if you're a site that wants to advertise your, motel or pub in a area, you can actually put your own branding on that app. You can highlight your charging location to bring more visitors. Perfect.
Excellent as well. So this is one of the case studies I think you might have mentioned earlier, in that these chargers can really be profitable. So this is a 120 kilowatt that we've previously installed.
Yep.
And what we're seeing is it's looking like it's going to be just over 3 years before it pays off its total revenue. So it's actually been installed just over a year now. And we're looking at returns of about 2,900 per month. If you include something like the WA Charge Up grant, where 50% of that cost will be covered, plus considerable percentage of that install cost, you're looking at a return of 2 years. It's a really huge revenue stream.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking at destination charging for the public, there's two different ways to look at AC and DC. So AC charging, you're more implementing that to drive more attraction to your business. You're not specifically using that charger to earn a lot of revenue. You can, but the main attraction is to bring it to the community where that person walks around for 1 or 2 hours and shops or stays in your business for a longer period of time. With DC charging, by nature, it's very rapid. So the benefit of this, or the focus on this DC, is you want vehicles to turn over very quickly. You want a lot of users per day charging off it because you can earn a lot of money. What we've seen is the average sessions per month of this charger was 201 sessions, which is pretty crazy. But what we find is from those 201 sessions, in terms of profit, they earned nearly $3,000. And in terms of revenue, it was nearly double that. So this is how we were able to graph it. And you can get all this data from that Explore and software platform that I just showed you. So that's where you can pull this information to really draw your own conclusions.
Definitely. And I think it's worth highlighting as well. If you're a driver of an EV and you're traveling considerable distance and you're stopping somewhere for lunch, you're going to stop somewhere where you can charge at the same time. You're not going to stop for lunch, drive 20 minutes, and then stop for another half hour down the road.
Yep.
So it definitely presents an opportunity to encourage people to come to that business.
Absolutely. Okay, so we mentioned load management technology before, and we'll quickly touch on it now, but this is specifically for sites that don't have much power availability. So the benefit of load management is that it helps protect your building's electrical infrastructure by controlling the charger's power. So let's say during the middle of the day when all the aircon and the lights are on, there's not going to be much power available. What this will do is it will tell all the charging stations to downrate. And then when there is enough power, it tells all the chargers to go back up to full capacity. The benefit of this is that it prevents you having to upgrade your switchboards, which can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and also lead to 6-month timelines. And then it allows you on top of that to be able to add 5 times the amount of charges you could before.
Absolutely. And it's worth highlighting that the reason these grants do have the caps on the installation costs is they do not want these excessive install costs. So keeping it down with load management below that grant limit, it makes financial sense.
Absolutely. So you can install, 10 grand worth of chargers instead of having to upgrade your switchboard, which can cost, over 50 to 100,000.
Absolutely. And as was requested within the WA grant, particularly for public chargers, there is a need for ongoing maintenance and support. So with chargers, it is actually recommended under the AS3000 wiring rules that annual maintenance is done basically on all public chargers or chargers that are in a location of significant potential wear. So we can provide maintenance with these chargers as well. So we do that yearly. And also it makes sure that you protect that investment realistically. So it makes sense to the annual maintenance.
Yeah. And with something like this, with your energy or your provider, your EV charging provider, it's important to understand initially what their service level agreement is. So that can give you a good understanding of how quickly they can support you. Like Thomas said, annual maintenance inspections, so at least once a year. Potentially for DC charging, you might want it more frequently because they get used a lot more often. And then in terms of support, that's where it's very important to think about spare parts and its availability and how quickly you can get access to those.
Absolutely. And with something like Explorer as well, what we can actually do is remotely monitor your chargers. So we'll know that they're down before you are, and we'll fix it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's where understanding if that organization or provider has a local engineering team and a local technical support team that can fix your issues, that can answer your calls when you make them, because no one wants a charger that's offline.
Absolutely. And it also feeds into having that screen on the charger because it provides information about what is going wrong. If it indicates that there's an issue with the internet connectivity, you probably know that the Ethernet connection's failing. So you can fix that yourself if you even need to.
Yeah.
And we can know and fix that at a faster rate.
Yeah. So with the chargers, we say a screen, and it's such a small thing, but it's because if a charger that doesn't have a screen goes offline, it's going to be a green light that turns red and doesn't communicate to you what the issue really is. Whereas if it has a screen and tells the error on the front of the screen, it can lead to the charger to be fixed a lot quicker. So just in terms of that aspect, is another advantage to why we like to push charging stations with a screen. Okay, so just a bit of a case study for everyone. So we're going to walk through a New South Wales Destination Charging Grant study and then a WA one. So this is actually a council that we worked with to implement AC charging stations at one of their sites. So as you can see on that image, there's 2 of the 4 charging stations that we installed. It's all wall mounted. This led to a more cost-effective install for the council. And the reason that they wanted the charging infrastructure was they wanted to bring more tourism to the community. They wanted to advertise that they were doing something that incentivized uptakes of electric vehicles. So we assessed the site and implemented 4 Ocular IQ commercial wall boxes on the building. When we assessed it, we determined that there wasn't enough power to put 4 of the chargers in. So we looked to add load management technology. Successfully, it's now been load controlling these chargers for the last 6 or 7 months. And then it has a software platform on it that allows for the tracking and monitoring and billing of the sessions, plus the ongoing support that we can provide if something goes wrong. What's funny actually is that with this location, there is a DC fast charging station located very close by, but that DC fast charger has been offline for the last 6 months. So everyone that comes to Hayes Shire, they're actually now relying on these charging stations to plug in and charge their vehicles so they can continue on their journey. So you can see in this image taken from PlugShare that a bunch of different EVs are plugged in and charging. And that just kind of speaks to the whole point of the destination charging grants. Like, 1, it's good to incentivize the uptake, but 2, it allows for more infrastructure so people aren't reliant on just one DC fast charging station to get them where they need to be. And in terms of the application, we obviously helped them through the quoting process. We helped them through creating the right solution for their site, and then they were able to apply and get it approved by the government. So this is a case study for the Charge Up WA grant. With this site, they actually had 4 of the dual port towers installed. So they covered 8 parking bays, and they really took advantage of what the grant's funding was providing. So their need was they wanted to attract more customers to their venue, and as well as build their brand image. And so from this, the WA Charge Up grant have actually done a case study video for this client that you can have a look at on their website. So not just have they managed to get a lot of funding for infrastructure, but they've actually been able to build their brand through both this image, which has been advertised in a lot of the documents, but also through case studies, letting them know that they're now on the map, and people can identify, oh, I have an EV, I want to park at a location that I can plug my vehicle in to charge. So Through this, we implemented 4 dual port towers. We understood that their power from their site was enough. They did have a lot of power. And we were able to add on software to be able to track and monitor the charging sessions and be able to bill users for that electricity. So the customer can earn a bit of revenue from these charging stations as well. And as usual, we help them through the grant process where they had questions around the application, specific requirements around getting a quote for hardware and software and installation, and we were able to help them through that.
Definitely. I think it's worth highlighting as well as this charger being the charger of choice that was displayed for the charge upgrade. The same dual port tower was actually shown in the New South Wales grant as well, which really shows how popular these chargers are within these grants.
And it looks good, to be honest. Like it's nice and slim. And one of the main things we haven't said is we can actually custom design these. So if your business wants to really highlight that you're being sustainable, you're charging ahead and incentivizing EVs and EV drivers to come to your location, we can custom wrap the charging stations in your business's design. We've done it before for the likes of the NRMA for a public location, and we can do the same thing for you. All right. So that is the end of the webinar. I guess this page essentially just provides a bit of detail around what we do, our main services, which ranges from everything from advice to then providing site assessment, recommending hardware and software, and then performing the installation of all of that, as well as providing those services such as maintenance and then ongoing local support.
Absolutely. The point to highlight is EVSE is the one-stop shop. We've got software engineers in-house. We've got electrical engineers. We can provide any sort of experience or advice that you need. We're one of the longest lasting companies within the EV business.
Yep.
So we do have that experience.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for listening. I think what we'll do now is just jump right across to the questions that I saw coming through throughout our presentation. So let's get right into it. So is there any grants for Victoria? Unfortunately, there's nothing for like destination charging per se. What we find is the grants for Victoria that were out a bit last year, it was mainly for fleets. So if you were a council or a government organisation or had a large amount of fleet vehicles, you could actually get a bit of grant funding for both the vehicle side as well as the charging, but nothing for really public destination charging yet. Okay, so are there any grants you are aware for Tasmania? Yes, so from my understanding, there were some small grants available several years ago, but nothing has come up recently from Tasmania. And it's the same thing for South Australia and Queensland. But what we're seeing is New South Wales brought out round 1 destination charging, and then Western Australia saw that and followed very quickly. So the idea is that eventually a lot of these states will be looking to follow in the footsteps of New South Wales and Western Australia. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year we get more grant funding being released.
Absolutely. And as soon as that does, we will have another webinar to cover that as well.
That's right. Any opportunity for rapid charging stations? So yes, there is an opportunity for that for DC charging, which is DC charging in Western Australia. So the grant funds everything from 7 kilowatts up to 350 kilowatts of DC power.
Unfortunately, there's not too much rapid charging for New South Wales. With the AC chargers, you are looking at around 8 to 10 hours from zero, which is unfortunately a little bit slower, but it still provides a good top up within an hour. You're still looking at 60 kilometers of charge within an hour, easily enough to get most people home. And if it's an overnight stay, that will fill their car.
Absolutely. And then with fire risk, yes. So yeah, fire risk is an issue, especially in enclosed car parks. We currently follow the NCC and EV Fire Safe, who are really like the governing body around electric vehicle battery fires. We have tried to take advantage and be the leader in providing fire risk and feasibility studies. So we've got our own documentation that outlines exactly what you need, such as master isolation switches, signage, fire engineers to have a look at the site. So if you have a concern around that, or if you have a site that you're looking to put charges in but need that assessed, we can help you with that.
Definitely. The odds that are currently published around EV fires, it's about 80 times more likely for a petrol vehicle to catch fire than an electric vehicle. So it is unlikely. So a lot of the governance around that is mostly around recommendations rather than restrictions.
Ali, so in WA, does the grant still allow on charging without any special limitations? By on charging, do you mean on charging the customer with the electricity? If you do, then yes, it allows you to bill the users for the charging session.
Absolutely. Whatever you bill is up to you as the customer. We don't dictate any of the rates, and nor does the WA government.
And that Explore and software platform, that allows you to bill on different tariffs. So you can do everything from energy usage, so just billing them in cents per kilowatt hour, to also billing them time-based, or both. So you can bill them if every 5 minutes they pay $1, that sort of thing. And then you can also bill them in time of day. So based on the time of day, you can incentivize people to charge or not charge based on how high you set the rate.
Definitely important for that WA charge up grant.
Yes. Solar power and battery storage can be integrated with charging stations. Good question. So we are working with a battery company to do so. You're seeing the NRMA already do things like this, especially for off-grid solutions where they have solar, they have battery, and during the day, and they have the DC chargers. And so during the day, they're powering the battery with the solar energy, and then the DC chargers connected to that battery. So this is actually already being used in industry, but the setup does cost more than just having a charger and having the right power at the site, especially considering DC charging does consume a huge amount of energy. So you'll need a lot of solar panels or a big battery to be able to maintain charging vehicles. Okay, Ali, does the grant WA allow for commercial buildings? So it seems like it doesn't allow for apartments, if that's what you're saying. It only allows for employee and fleet charging, destination charging, and public charging. So I'd say no.
Yeah, it specifically doesn't allow strata, unfortunately, to apply for the charge up grant.
Yep, and what is an average power consumption per day for 7 kilowatt and 22 kilowatt systems? So yeah, Rajesh, with these AC chargers, you probably only get around, on average, 5 sessions per day, because each session can take 2 hours, and that's about 10 hours of the day. And then within that, they're probably consuming around 20 kilowatt hours of energy. So maybe 100 kilowatt hours of energy, maybe less, so 80 to 100.
I think, yeah, particularly if you look at it from the point of view of vehicles, most electric vehicles are around 70 kilowatt hours. Yep. So if you're looking to fill a vehicle, you're probably looking to fill 70 if that's from zero.
Yeah, exactly right. And Debbie, I've heard that most EVs can't charge faster than 7 kilowatt other than via the Chatamo port. Should we opt for a 22 kilowatt charger to future-proof? Yep. So good question. Actually, a lot of the most recent electric vehicles on the market can take 11 kilowatt. So it depends, but what you'll find is Tesla, Polestar, the high-end Kias and Hyundai vehicles, the Porsches, they can all take around 11 kilowatts of AC charge. And then you'll see the BYDs and the MGs, they typically take around 7 kilowatts.
Definitely. And I think some of the larger electric vehicles that we're starting to see are actually a little bit higher than that. So some of the large Teslas take about 16.5. And even further on, when you get to the large vehicles, you can see them go up to 22 kilowatts.
Yeah. So if I had the ability to implement a charging station at my site, I would try to get the 3-phase charging, because it does provide around 80 kilometers of range per hour to a vehicle. So you can provide more power and a quicker turnaround for vehicles. And it future-proofs your site, so you can charge any EV at its fastest AC speed. Do you have an option of wall mounting chargers instead of ground? Yes, we do. Can you limit the charging to say 50 minutes or 1 hour maximum and charge accordingly? Yes, so you can do quite a lot of, there's quite a lot of functionality with that Exploring platform. You can look at limiting charging sessions via time, or you can set that the vehicle is meant to charge there for a certain period of time, let's say an hour, and every minute or so after that, they're billed at a higher rate to incentivize them to move the vehicle. In New South Wales, is it common for charger providers to also offer monitoring and call-out service for maintenance repairs on a fee-for-service basis? Yeah, so Debbie, with the charging infrastructure, it's common to offer maintenance, which is annual. It's a recommendation by the Australian standards, and it essentially allows us to go to site to test and check the charger both physically as well as electronically. Our electrical teams will have a testing kit, and similar to any electrical partner, they'll have a testing kit that they can plug in and test. In terms of how quickly to service the repairs, that's down to the service level agreement that you sign with that client. So understanding you might need to pay a little bit more if you really want super fast service, like for 1 day or same day turnaround. But traditionally, it's good to understand what the average service time is for that company, and then you can kind of gauge off other providers, like where they sit and where you feel is most comfortable.
Absolutely. You want to make sure you have a provider that has the spare parts within the country. Otherwise, you could be looking at potentially weeks to get something repaired.
And it's good to keep in mind that the charging stations have 2-year hardware warranties, but you can extend them all the way up to 5 years. And within that, if something faults just a component and it is like the hardware fault, then a call out is covered. You're not charged for anything, as well as the spare part. It's all covered under the warranty.
Ongoing maintenance, as was mentioned, it is a recommendation, and under the WA Charge Up grant for the public sites, it is a requirement. So during that actual inspection, in terms of the software, we do look at doing a software update as well if there is any sort of requirements around that. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's recommended, definitely.
Yep. Yeah. So look, you typically wouldn't want to integrate parking rates as well as EV charge rates, because you're kind of double charging the customer. You can either bill them via the parking rate, and the incentive for them to come to that parking car parking location is because you have a charger, or they can somehow have a way that you can track if it's an EV, and then they're billed at a higher rate. But there's different ways to go about it. And in terms of asset life, because these chargers, you can essentially treat them like Lego. If something faults, you take it out and replace it with a spare part. Their lifetime is 10 years. So they have a 2-year up to 5-year warranty, especially for the ocular chargers, but their lifetime can really keep extending.
I think with the software as well, it is fully API integrable. So you can look at kind of communicating between your softwares if you're looking to bill it across one of the softwares as opposed to two.
Yep. All right. So last couple of questions is for Ali, for WA, what's the cost/charging model rates? So you typically charge a lot more for DC, so around the 70 cents per kilowatt hour mark. For AC, you typically look around that 30 to 40 cents per kilowatt hour mark.
Definitely one of the good ways to tell is just go on the PlugShare app, which has all the publicly listed sites within Australia, and you can get an idea of what people are charging for that rate in your area.
Yep. Jackie, so with load management, it can load manage up to 250 charging stations for a single site. So that should pretty much cover whatever site you're looking at implementing infrastructure to. Rajesh, any grants from the Australian government or ARENA? Not yet for the typical business, unfortunately. These statewide grants are currently the only things available for standard businesses. And Graham, lastly, is V2H and V2G, when will it be available in WA? So right now there's one vehicle to grid and vehicle to home charger on the market. However, it's only compatible with the old vehicle types, so the Nissan Leaf and the Mitsubishi Outlander. We are working on developing a vehicle to grid charger that should be arriving next year that will allow us to charge from the modern vehicle port types. So Type 2 and CCS2. I understand it's a very great technology. It'll be awesome, but it is taking time because it's so technical in the way that you have to transfer power back to the grid or back to the home. But next year, around Q2, Q3 is when it will be available.
Absolutely. And it's ensuring there is that compatibility between the charger and the vehicle.
Yep, absolutely. Perfect. Okay, guys, thank you very much. That is the webinar for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested, please just put your email address in the chat and we can make sure to specifically email it to you, or if you want us to just get in contact, we can do that as well. Otherwise, we will shoot you through this webinar recording in a day or two so you can look back at it and run through all the information again.
Absolutely. If you've got any questions, feel free to email us. We're always happy to help.
Yep, and our emails are here. So my email, my phone number, as well as Thomas's email. So austin.devaney@evse.com.au or thomas.best@evse.com.au.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, for joining. We'll just leave this open if you do want to put your email addresses in the chat. Otherwise, yeah, have a great day and thanks for joining.
Thank you.